Ladies and gentlemen, the crypto space. We're live on a Monday, January 23rd at 11:02 a.m. So I come up with my ideas relatively quickly prior to a stream, and the reason I do that is to be spontaneous. I really want to tell a story based on sentiment for the day, what I'm thinking about, what's going on in the market, something that's hopefully relevant, and I wanted to start this stream with what I do. There is a game where you have two pictures and you have items on each picture. It's the same picture, but some items are different. The entire game that I play is spot the difference. What's the difference between things? What's the difference between markets? What's the difference between people? What's the difference between incentives, behavior? You take it to the extent of what you could possibly imagine. I just like to spot the difference and I isolate what that difference is and I assess if it's meaningful, if it has significance, if other people are likely to be interested in it, if they actually understood it. So that's also why on the stream I like to relate things to, you know, shit that everyone understands, be it government or business or what have you. I put things that are different into context that obviously it helps me understand them, and that's what we talk about. It helps me convey it to other people why these things appear different and meaningful to me. So it's a fun game we play. And what's the title of the stream today? The title of the stream is Business Structure and Behavioral Incentives. Well, first off, we'll keep it on this screen before I pop it over to the main screen. Business structure. Corporations, partnerships, sole proprietorship, which is basically like, hi, I'm a business, because you don't even have to register a sole proprietorship and, using your own tax ID. So it's no different between you just running a business. You're just labeling yourself. Well, it's important to define your behavior. I guess the sole proprietorship is really a fascinating way to define your behavior, that you are engaging in a business, you are enterprising. So a corporation is like a declaration and a registration. You're affirming to some sort of central authority that you are engaging in a business. So, these things have historic meaning. They're significant. Coordinate and declare a statement of behavior, an organization, and that's exactly why they call it articles of incorporation, which is the formation of an organization. Organization. People behaving in a concerted effort to achieve a common interest. So we put all these labels on shit historically, and we have all these things that we've done in society that everyone's aware of, and most people don't do corporations. But just because there's a label on them doesn't mean the label really has significance. As I said just moments ago, it's a declaration of behavior. So that leads me to, what I see in the crypto markets. What are people what are people not seeing? What are people not seeing? People see, first off, the same thing they see in traditional markets. They see, I can buy something hoping that other people buy it so that I could sell it at the price that's now inflated because other people bought it. So that's the classical behavioral scenario, sequence of events, causality for a market. And by definition, that's what a Ponzi scheme is. Ponzi schemes. One of the most grossly misused qualifications or declarations of an asset or market of assets I've seen in the last couple of years. But that's a behavior, and everything shares a very similar behavior. Now, digress a second. The classical definition of a Ponzi scheme is an investment contract where someone accumulates capital and just pays that capital to other investors to incentivize their investment. So, I mean, that's exactly what capital gains is. You are buying an asset, hoping that other people buy that asset. So you can sell that asset and capture their capital. It's just a circular capital flow where new capital in is being used, is capitalized upon by the capital that was first there. The whole system is premised on this circular capital flow. Someone's in first, is able to capitalize on someone who is in after or later. And that's like strong hands. You're in early, and in 10 years' time, Bitcoin is going to be $250,000, and you're going to capitalize on all those people that bought it after you. Circular capital flows. It's not only just the nature of markets, it's the nature of business. A business sells a product, receives capital, buys more product, sells that product, receives more capital, buys more product. Everything is circular. So what's the difference? It's all the same thing. Everything's the same thing over and over again. And people like to think one business is different than another when they play the stock market or the crypto markets. It's all the same. So what's the opportunity? Yeah, sure, you could get ahead of, a commodity revolution where all of a sudden the U.S. is getting off of carbon fuels and going towards batteries, and you're like, all right, lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite. So the companies in the U.S. mining those things are probably going to do very well over the next decade. But it's the same premise from an investment perspective. You're going to buy something because you see that narrative early, and someone else is going to buy it after you, and you're going to capitalize on them. So what's the difference? There's only one thing that I see different in all of this, and ultimately that's the time lock. The time lock means you cannot capitalize on people that bought after you. That changes the entire equation. Now, I'm always in a process of digesting the extent of the significance of an observation, but at this point in the conversation that we're having, that's the difference. That's the only difference between everything that has ever occurred in crypto and traditional enterprise. Now, I define crypto as basically enterprise, and you could break down, be granular with the types of enterprise, but it's still a form of enterprise nonetheless, whether it's financial or gambling or what have you, tokenized representation of real-world assets, remittance. These are enterprise. They have cash flow. They have balance sheets. They have stakeholders. So it's all the same. There's no difference. Both pictures are identical. Whether you have a money market like Aave or even a Forex market, it's the same thing. It's the same enterprise. So what is different? The only big difference, well, there's many big differences, but we could highlight a couple of them. Now, if you go to HSBC and you say you want to open a Forex market where you want to be a market maker, can you do that? Can you, a market maker historically would be on the floor of the stock exchange or they're big banks, big business, providing deep liquidity. So that is different. Aave, Uniswap was the first where you could be a market maker sitting in your home office. That is quite different. And that's meaningful, systemically meaningful. But whether something that's meaningful is an opportunity or not, that's always relative to the other things that are meaningful. So what we're doing constantly is an evaluation of what are the meaningful things and what of those meaningful things offer the best opportunity. So a market maker, you could be a market maker. You take $10 million and you provide liquidity and capital to Uniswap and you'll make income. And whatever the price action of the individual components of the liquidity, is somewhat irrelevant. What's pertinent is the cash flow, and what's pertinent is the ownership of a quantity of liquidity. So that's an enterprise unto itself. Market making is a traditional operation. So while it's innovative that anyone could be a market maker, main screen, anyone could be a market maker, is it truly innovative? Is the market making enterprise a significant enterprise? So I like and really appreciate, everyone needs to appreciate what Uniswap introduced. But it's not very exciting or what's truly innovative to me from an ownership standpoint. Market making. Sure, if you had the capital, great, groovy. If you had $100 million and you wanted to take $10 million and earn an extra $1 million a year, 10%, let's say, all right, cool. Sounds like a side hustle. Who the fuck has that kind of money? So that brings us to opportunities for persons with less capital. And that's something obviously we all think about. Now, this is clearly an education channel and an investment conversation to identify opportunity, and different things we talk about cater to different size portfolios. Clearly, the vast majority of the content doesn't cater to, 9-figure portfolios. And it's hard to really cater content to the entire range of portfolio sizes. So, honestly, and just disclosing, the vast majority of the content is probably geared to 6-7-figure portfolios. 3, 4, 5-figure portfolios. You're probably going to be engaging in the adversarial capital gains. Now that's understandable, but that's the same. Now we'll bring it back to our original topic. What's different? Where is the biggest innovation? Now, the biggest innovation is not necessarily an investment opportunity that's really lucrative or accessible to the majority. And, that brings me to a point where the reality is that's unfortunate, but it is a traditional situation throughout markets historically. Ownership. What do you want to own? And I've tweeted about this. Can you own a meaningful position? And if you can't own a meaningful position, you have to entertain other types of activity that's more suitable to what you can do. So, you have to play your hand. You can only play the cards that are in your hand. And you can't overplay your hand. That doesn't work out well. So, what is different is certainly a capacity to own a Forex market. You cannot own a Forex market in traditional finance. You can provide liquidity to a Forex market, but you can't own a piece of HSBC's international currency exchange. Not providing liquidity to HSBC, but say you want to buy 0.1% of all cash flow of HSBC. Yeah, that's not owning HSBC stock and getting dividends. That's not that. The dividends goes through their entire human resources, goes through all of their real estate, goes through all their benefits and stakeholders and investors and debt and executives. Fuck that. So you need something different. And the difference here is that a couple of protocols, and it's not all of these on the list here, that disintermediate their cash flow. The cash flow going through the business doesn't just go to the business, it goes directly distributed, where there's no person, no hands-on. It's literally directly distributed by the protocol itself, by the software, by the business itself. There's no person clicking a button that distributes this capital. These are automated processes. The business is an entity unto itself, operating automatically. That's very different. Imagine a big bank that has no employees, that has no executives. And it's complicated to evaluate all of these things granularly, meaning There's obviously stakeholders of these crypto protocols. There's developers. There's early investors that have large positions. And that brings us to like the statement I made recently about assessing alignment to evaluate an investment opportunity and the risks thereof. But this is one heck of a list. I've been thinking about this list a lot, especially as the order has changed, was solidly going basically straight up the list and was approaching Frax for a bit, but is still quite a distance away from convex. It really went pretty parabolic and has been staying up there, which is quite interesting because you could have a stakeholder, one of the original investors that carries a lot of weight in the organization, and they have incentive to support the financial stability of the enterprise. But that can't account for this kind of growth. That can't account for the TVL. And the TVL is from the incentive system, the mechanic. And that's why part of the title of the stream is incentives. There are zero incentives to invest in traditional enterprise stocks. You could open your own business. That's another story. But what's the incentive to buy Apple? There is none. You don't get anything. They don't give you shit. You get nothing for buying Apple stock. Nothing. Human beings respond to incentives and opportunity. Now, it's always disappointing to me that the opportunity that people see in traditional growth stock is so misguided, and it ultimately leads to the vast majority of people allocating to just lose because they don't understand that the opportunity is a field filled with predators that have much more depth to their narratives. They don't understand what they're getting in with. So what was that metric we saw recently where like 100% of retail investors are out of the stock market? They're just out since 2022, just completely cleared the board of retail. What a shame. So, I don't know. That's why I do this channel, to try and educate, to give these more rich narratives, more depth to the narratives. So these are different. These are very different than traditional enterprise, each one for separate reasons. Detractors will be very critical of all of them, lumping them all into a single category. But bear in mind, this is also a very concentrated list amongst a very large list of total assets in the DeFi space. But these are very unique. And some have borrowed features and functionality from others. There's one on here that everyone has borrowed features from, and that happens to be the second one on the list. Ethereum, it's only transitory that you can't unstake voluntarily, whereas Curve is the first to offer the escrow, where it is deterministically an unliquidatable position for a period of time. That is historically novel. There is nothing like that in all of finance that's enforced deterministically. Now, obviously, you could have a contract that states an investment is in place for a period of time, but that's on paper, and that's enforced by courts, and that's enforced by counterparties, and all of those pieces of that puzzle carry risk. Risk of lack of compliance, risk of enforcement or lack thereof. So the most innovative thing that I can possibly condense that has come out of the entire crypto space is deterministic escrow for a period of time that involves no human counterparty. And the only way that escrow is broken is literally a malfunction in the contract, but lendiness shows that the longer it exists, the more trustworthy it becomes, and once you have billions and billions of dollars dependent on that contract, executing the escrow time lock accordingly, there's a point in which it's basically shown to be functional. Time-locked capital. That changes the entire equation. That's something very different. Now, how long has crypto existed? 2 years. You can't assess shit in 2 years. You cannot assess how crypto is going to impact traditional finance from a business structure perspective. Finding my mouse. From a business structure perspective and a behavioral incentives perspective in 2 years' time. I mean, look how long it takes for interest rate hikes to filter through the system. What, 12, 16 months? Months? It takes forever for these macroeconomic financial pressures to propagate through the system. And folks are trying to assess what's unique in crypto over a 2-year period of time through a period of degeneracy and extraordinary excess liquidity through a bubble, a liquidity bubble. Separate and apart from the exuberance and the liquidity bubble is the property that I just defined. Time-locked, deterministic, no counterparty escrow. That's fascinating because that's the two pictures of what's historic, what has always existed with corporations and enterprise and people and business throughout history, and the new shit that people are coding. The two pictures, that's what's different. That's fascinating to me. The significance of that from an investment standpoint is independent, but they're loosely coupled. So now obviously each one of these protocols has deeply ingrained incentive systems to encourage particular human behavior. So now, what are all financial systems? Be sovereigns, corporations, or between people. Your balance sheet, your individual balance sheet. The capital is circular. Capital goes in, capital comes out. The incentive system is designed to encourage behavior that for capital to come in, optimally to match the capital that goes out, in which case there would be a balanced balance sheet. This is why historically I've talked about trade deals, which is an incentive system. Well, tariffs and tax breaks, and that's all incentive systems. It's the same exact fucking shit. So everything that every one of the detractors are so critical of in the crypto space, it's the same exact thing. It's doing the same exact thing. So the exercise we're doing today is not to say even why crypto is meaningful. It's to say what's different, what is unique. Because everything we've talked about shows it's the exact same goddamn thing, except the few things that are unique. And that is what offers the opportunity. Can't own a forex market in traditional finance, but it still exists. It's the same business. It's the incentives. It's these tokenomics, which is these monetary policies that traditionally were managed by, that are managed by sovereigns and central banks. And you had your period of time with the wildcat banks, and banks issue currency, and you have the whole commercial bank money creation process where the U.S. government barely issues any of the currency, and the vast majority of the currency in circulation around the planet is private money. It's not public money. It's issued by banks in the form of credit, where there's a liability and a debt and an asset and a liability that balances the books. The vast majority of the currency that we use is private money. You get your deposit from work right to your bank account. Your bank account has credits. You spend on a credit card and you pay your credit card from a bank account. All private money, not public money. So humans have been in the business of creating private money, well, since since commercial banks issued loans, since modern banking. Now, there's probably a great historian like Lynn Alden that could probably describe where the critical threshold was breached, where private money exceeded public money. It was probably in the last 100 years. Probably, I don't know. I can't talk to the topic, but isn't that fascinating that folks are so critical of cryptocurrencies? They're worth nothing. They're not a currency. What is a currency? Money, they say money issued by the government. So the vast majority of money isn't issued by the government. The vast majority of money is private money. So what the fuck are they talking about? This is all the same thing. Everything that we do here in crypto is the exact same goddamn thing they do in traditional finance. Except we have access. We could do things that you can't do in traditional finance, and there is the things that are unique. And those are the things that I like to talk about. I like to talk about the things that are unique in a market full of things that you cannot access in traditional finance. So we've highlighted some of the most meaning things in a market that is quite meaningful. The most meaningful of the meaningful, which is meaningful squared. Now, obviously, meaningful squared, that's an interesting phrase, meaningful squared. These are the things that stand out in crypto because crypto stands out from everything else. That's meaningful squared. And now each one of these, you could probably isolate meaningful cubed, which is of the meaningful squared, what is the most meaningful? And that's, subjective in many regards, but it's also quantitative because you could assess what has worked and what is working. Each one of these, I'm not going to dig in because each one of these has an entire story. But Solidly is doing very interesting things for the same reason we discussed it last year when Andre first released it. He's right. He's just very smart. And, plenty of people just don't understand what he did, why he did it, and don't understand. Yeah, they lose money, but he's testing and prod. They don't appreciate. He said, I'm going to deploy this immutably. That's meaningful. And losing money is not an indication of something not being meaningful. It means lack of due diligence, excess risk taking. And look, if you saw that the emissions were significantly above defined protocol emissions in the documentation, that's a malfunction. So clearly there's a way to exercise due diligence to assess whether something is going to perform as expected. So, a little bit more due diligence and we could have saved capital on that. But this time is V2. And from what I see, the emissions are spot on. And from what I see, there's large stakeholders that have very reasonable. It's reasonable to assess that their alignment is positive, and their alignment is more interested in the success and the destination of the protocol than would be short-term capitalization, because there's an interesting target. And the target is obviously like a curve and a Uniswap. It's an interesting one, which I sized accordingly, relatively small compared to Aura and Balancer. And Aura and Balancer were relatively small compared to Curve. And the narrative there is that Curve first out of the gate, as that's the whole disruption of disruptors. Disruption of ongoing disruptions almost never occurs in history. So that's the simple narrative there. But You have plenty of competition. And Aura is, very interesting what Aura is doing and Balancer because they're pivoting, very nimble. That's meaningful. Um, Clearly not an immutable implementation, and that's something also that's nice about Curve. It's quite immutable, IPFS accessible, so that's quite meaningful, especially in the climate of regulation. The Balancer and Aura, the second to come along with that feedback loop of incentive systems that are intent drawing capital in with incentives to compensate for capitalization, capital out. And that's a market. That's a business. That's a fucking country with a trade deal and a somewhat decent monetary policy. The whole point of a damn country is to be productive, for capital to come in, to export the productivity, the commodities or whatever, the productivity in general. And now they have capital, so the capital could go out, and it's just circular. Everything is circular. That's what these are. Now, what catches my fancy about the AMMs, it's not even an automated market maker, but they are market maker. These are exchanges. These are Forex markets. That's probably the best description. What catches my fancy is that they're a market of markets. Each asset unto itself has a balance sheet. Each asset unto itself has a lot of assets nowadays have figured out incentive systems work to drive capital in to compensate for capital outflow associated with capitalization. So each one of these markets is a market of markets. And each of the markets has that circular capital flow, and this market of markets has that circular capital flow. So these are by far the most unique systems in the entire crypto space. Now you have great businesses. You have great markets. GMX has been very successful. It's a great market. It's a heck of a business, heck of an enterprise. But these are markets of markets. GMX is inevitably listed on some sort of exchange. I guess they could ultimately become a market of markets, which is the sense that everyone probably expects, that diversify, because obviously if you're a trading protocol with options and perpetual swaps, what have you, that is the precursor to a market of markets. So you could see how that could occur. But the incentive systems that have been built into this list are incentives based on a market of markets. So they're much broader in scope. They're quite meaningful. These types of systems that you see on this list don't exist in traditional finance. This is the difference between the two pictures of traditional finance and the shit that's going on in crypto. And look, they use the word wars and our memes and our stuff. I find it fascinating. The older generations are so critical of crypto. Is it that they're critical of crypto, or they come from a generation that didn't grow up with Call of Duty and Xbox and arcade games? Even I grew up with arcade games and Mortal Kombat at the local arcade in the late 80s, early 90s. So I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest of the millennials. I don't understand, but maybe I don't understand that mentality, but maybe that is what offers the opportunity for the younger generation. So demographics. Peter Zeihan, he loves to talk demographics. You understand demographics. You're thinking about the ebbs and flows, the directionality of a society. Older generations get older, have different interests, different wants, different needs. They respond to different incentives. They are not incentivized to adopt a new system, a new technology. In fact, they are dependent on the status quo. The oldest of generations is dependent on Social Security. They are completely dependent on the status quo system continuing to operate as normal. They have zero incentive to digest, appreciate, or engage with a reimagination of status quo systems. This is why demographics are so meaningful to understand. As the shift occurs where the newer, younger generations in population size overtake the older generations, unfortunately, opportunistically, the opinion of the older generations are marginalized and become less important. They become a minority. That's a complicated topic because the opinion of the minority is meaningful. But when it's critical of something that's positive, something that brings people together with something new, exciting, interesting, changing the social dynamic, the social contract in many regards, it very much allows us to ignore their short-sighted and myopic opinions. Their opinions don't count. And that's refreshing because I think the younger generations have great ideas. They respond to different things, respond to different incentives. They want to achieve different things with their life. Look at the hippie movement in the 60s. I mean, everyone, if you really dig in, you could appreciate that. How many people like getting up 5 days a week, working 40 hours a week? For what? But you don't dig in and understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. This is all a system. A system that's created to organize labor, to ration commodities. Holy fuck. So everyone's like, they're going to implement a rationing system. No, what do you think currency is? What do you think it all is? This is a rationing system. This is a commodity credit system. That's what money is. It's credits for egg sandwiches so you can eat. That's a hot topic. That gets me all excited. So that's why these things are meaningful, because of demographics. And it's iterating atop an egg sandwich credit system, a commodity credit system that allows people to engage in things that incentivize them in different ways. So it encourages participation. Look at our fucking government with voting. What's the incentive to vote? That you can make change? Are people making change with their elected officials? No, there's no incentive to vote. Your opinion doesn't matter. And that's probably one of the most disappointing things that's real. So, you vote with your wallet, sure. And that's if you're in the majority of voting actors. So the same thing occurs here. The larger your voting power, the more weight you carry. So at least in the crypto space, it's fucking honest. I'm going to rent some damn votes. So I love that. If you're lobbying to get a law passed, you're using an incentive. It's literally, it's lobbying. When you're renting votes, you're lobbying. It's the same thing. So that's refreshing. And there's no banning it. There's no banning lobbying. It's human nature to respond to incentives. So I love the transparency of these markets. There's no bullshit. It's on chain. It's deterministic. There's no humans enforcing the behavior of these protocols. They just do what they do based on software that you begin to trust as over time they build linearness. The longer software works, the more likely it is going to continue to work. And it eliminates the issues potentiality. Because there's an incentive to destroy a protocol, especially when there's billions of dollars at stake. So these are the survivors of all those years you guys spent frolicking around degenerate in the crypto markets. What have I talked about throughout 2022? The survivors. And what have we talked about today? What is meaningful? Because what is meaningful is different. What is different is what most people don't see. And when most people don't see, it means you see it first, they're buying it after you. So yes, obviously, the things that I talk about, full circle, are geared towards 6, 7, 8-figure portfolios. But if they're different, and I'm talking about things that are different, even though the strategy that we deploy from an ownership standpoint, from a relatively moderately large stakeholder standpoint, can be deployed from a smaller portfolio standpoint. It's not the locking. You're not taking advantage of the most innovative component of the system, but you've identified that an innovative component of the system exists that draws in the mid-size actors, and that means there's going to be a flood of other actors in the future that are like, oh, that shit is different. So these are the types of things that are played from a capital gains perspective for the larger, smaller portfolios. These are the things that are different. These are the things that are unique. And it's a relatively short fucking list. You know, we've often talked about how many damn protocols there are, and I have often said the vast majority of them are useless. And, you know, it's a short list of shit that's meaningful. A short list of shit that has the survivability characteristic. And that is the most important thing to identify. Why can it survive? Why will it likely survive? And then and only then can you assess what can it do for me. All right, let's hit some comments and see if I can help you guys out. That was probably one of my favorite stories. That was a good one today. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. Hilda's in the house. Gaffer, Critical Mass, Pleasure, Grind Rain. Grid Rain. Hello. Tapsy, it's Monday. Yes, it is. Paul, 7 in the stream, 4 likes. 29 people in the stream, 14 likes. We can do better. Paul, Mick in the house. Property is a Ponzi. That, of course. It's all, if you could buy it and sell it and you're dependent on someone else buying it after you, that's by definition a Ponzi, because if they stop buying it, then where's the value? If everyone stops buying homes, the value goes to zero because you can't sell them, and that means people have to mark down the price in order to actually sell them. So it collapses. So pricing, valuation is all dependent on that circular flow of capital. Otherwise, it implodes. Pretty obvious to me. So it's all the circular flow of capital. Which is, and how do you encourage that circular flow to continue to exist? Incentives? Now, what is a Ponzi scheme? It's all a damn Ponzi. That's right, one curious. Bill, always happy to catch a stream. It's a pleasure. What's your opinion on DPX, VDPX? That's cool. Derivatives are cool. Derivatives are a business. Derivatives in this market, in crypto, it's a market which has an incentive system which tries to influence capital flows to incentivize capital inflow to balance outflow. So that's a balance sheet. So it's a business. I like businesses. Owning a business is cool, especially if it pays you, and there's dividends, and there's disintermediated cash flow. So I like it. Is it something that I'm interested in? No. Do I keep an eye on it? Sure. Do I like what Tetranode talks about? Sure. The only way to really define your own story is to understand other people's stories. And you can only assess what you can do by assessing what other people can do and having a relative proportionality. And don't overplay your damn hand. Hope that helps. Brady, good day, a pleasure. Smash the likes, we can do better. Raul, hey, hey. Also on that topic, geo-blocked U.S. customers from their front end. Yeah, but geo-blocking does nothing. That's for their protection more so than ours. And there's nothing that VPN or interacting directly with the contracts doesn't solve. So that's something interesting. Like Liquidity has multiple front ends, and you can do IPFS front ends, and we talked about handshake protocol like Beacon. I'll pull it up. Bookmarks, like the Beacon browser that offers dis distributed front ends that are on the handshake network, but there's also IPFS like Uniswap. Let's see if it's loaded. I don't know. Yeah, look. So here's IPFS on Uniswap on IPFS. So this is not interacting with uniswap.com or whatever the hell their domain name is. This is on your local machine. This is the Uniswap user interface on your local machine. So geo-blocking doesn't mean much. And just restricting access doesn't mean anything in a world where you could just interact with a contract from your local machine. I like 1inch. I like their product. I don't like their business, but that's another story. That's just because I have no access to their business. But look, IPFS, bam. Okay, thank you very much. And also on the Handshake network, if it's working, no, I got to restart Beacon. Oh, no, it's working. The DNS fallback, that's the way Handshake works. So that's cool. So this is their handshake.front end. So there's plenty of ways to access contracts, well, even though you don't need DNS. There's no DNS involved there. That's IPFS and Handshake HNS. If anyone's interested, Beacon browser, impervious.com Beacon. Just a browser. It's Handshake network and P2P and IPFS, but it's their version of it over there. Uh, their their network, their blockchain network, and that's cool. Last couple of questions. We'll wrap it up. What aura bribes you're eyeing on cap since large vote size comes in very last minute? I'd like to know what your choice is. Voting round ends in 3 hours. Let's look at the llama. I don't know. We'll see what I could get this week. I wouldn't mind a couple bucks. We're at 6.2 cents. That's nice. Oh, I got the wrong wallet selected. A couple bucks. I don't think this will stick. Maybe it will. 5.6 cents. 6.2. Maybe it will stick. This is over. And I don't know why Llama shows like 9 hours left, but it's only a couple hours, like you say. Oh, fiat. I like fiat. I maybe see my complexity. This is what I talked about earlier. I can't get a good piece of this because it's a decent size aura position. So I need to really focus on the larger ones like a ribbon or a Stargate. I could get nice capitalization there, especially if it's 9.5 cents. I don't think it's going to stick at 9.5 cents. Nobody's going to get $15 per VO aura. The votes are going to rebalance. So what's pertinent is you're probably going to get 6.2, maybe you get 6.5, 6.8, 7 cents if you're lucky and you really adjust the vote last minute. But also pertinent is liquidity. Stargate has a decent amount of moderate sized liquidity now. The market has bumped a bit. But I like the stables. Like RF is given 9.37K in stables, but some of them are only stables. Look, that's only $770. Metastable WSTF is $5 grand in just pure stables. So that's cool. I like the pure USDC if you could find one that's decent. Volk's going to dilute in the last minute. Right now, numbers are big. Yeah, but look, 6.2 cents. That's cool. Last week it was 15. Let's see. Come on, anything's got to be better than 2.6 cents. It's got to be with the market doing what it's doing. At least the numbers got to go up a little bit. Come on, give me a break. 2.6 cents. It's austerity. We're living through damn austerity. Even 4.8 cents would be nice. Come on. Or we could have the good old days. 5.8 cents. Woo, woo. Come on, baby. That'd be nice if we could get back to decent numbers. Anyway, let's wrap it up for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Monday, January 23rd at 11:52 a.m. I wish you all the best. Tell everyone to subscribe, because if you're not listening, I can't help you do a little bit better. After party on Discord for the most rational community in the entire crypto space. As always, I'll be on there in a little bit. I appreciate everyone in there. Catch you on Friday. Peace.